And I'd now like to introduce you to Susie from Pause and Breathe, who is going to give us a little beginners half-hour session on mindfulness. So over to you now, Susie.
That's lovely. Thank you so much, Anne Marie. And yeah, thank you to everyone who's given up some of their lunch to be here. I know that you've got this break and you've chosen to spend this half hour here, so I'm really pleased to see everyone. I'm Susie Hooper. I run Pause and Breathe, which is a wellbeing community interest company. We started up Pause and Breathe about 5 years ago, and last year changed it to a social enterprise. And we really believe that wellbeing should be accessible to as many people as possible. And now we have the social enterprise, it's a little bit easier to put that mission into practice. I was a social worker for 20 years before that, working in criminal justice. And although those two things feel like they don't really, meet somehow, it's all about helping people to cope better with these circumstances that they find themselves in. And mindfulness, which is what I really teach, that's really what that's all about. So I know that people will probably have arrived with kind of different experiences of mindfulness. Some people might be complete beginners, other people might even have a daily practice. And just to say, I'm not going to, get too kind of caught up in definitions and trying to tease out what mindfulness really is. But I will give a little bit of an overview just so that we all know what we're talking about. And we'll also have the chance to practice together as well during this lunch break. So I know that the idea of mindfulness can sometimes feel a little bit overwhelming. People often think that it's all about kind of sitting, meditating and being really zen and kind of really chilled. And this idea of kind of having an empty mind and ignoring all distractions and really just being present can feel really overwhelming. We kind of think, well, how do I do that? Our minds are really busy, our lives are really busy. How can we just sit and simply be? And I want to kind of reassure you that that isn't really what mindfulness is about. So we do sometimes practice mindfulness meditation. And what we say with that is we're really strengthening the muscle of mindfulness when we're doing that, where we're kind of making that stronger, we're making that more robust. But actually, we can bring mindfulness into our daily lives in lots of different ways. And I'll touch on some of those today. And then sometimes we think, when we've got different things going on in life, sometimes we feel really overwhelmed, we're really busy, and it feels like we don't have time for mindfulness. Or maybe sometimes, there's a pain that's really present and we feel that we can't focus on something else because the pain is really dominant. Or we might have problems with concentrating, or, there might be so many different things that we might feel, well, these get in the way of me practicing. And again, I'd like to kind of say that I've recently come to my own definition of what mindfulness really is. And I really firmly believe that it's all about choice. So if we're having a difficult time, we might choose not to sit and practice a meditation. We might choose to go out walking, for example, and practice mindfulness that way. Or if we're finding that we're listening to guidance that's telling us to focus on something, and that something's really uncomfortable, then we can choose to kind of put our focus somewhere else. So when we do practice mindfulness, we're choosing to be in the moment. So we're really being in the here and now. Quite often our mind is pulled away by things that have already happened, and we're kind of churning them over, or we're making plans for the future, and we kind of get caught up in what might be. So we're really choosing to be present when we practice. We're choosing where to place our focus. So mindfulness is always mindfulness of something. So we can practice mindfulness of the breath. We might practice mindfulness of one of the senses or the body, or we might choose to place our focus in lots of different places. We're also choosing not to get hooked up into our thoughts and distractions. So often we can just get lost in thought, and our minds are kind of jumping from one thing to another. And so we can choose just to unhook from that. It doesn't mean that the mind will be quiet. Quite often the mind will still chatter away, but we're just choosing not to engage with that. We're choosing to place our focus somewhere else. And then lastly, and I think this is probably my favorite part of mindfulness, we're really choosing to let go of the judgmental mind. So often our mind is chattering away to us, and it's telling us all sorts of things about the experience that we're having, or it might be criticizing us or judging others. And when we practice mindfulness, we're really coming away from that, and we're bringing in an attitude of curiosity and acceptance. So when we focus on whatever it is that we're focusing on, we're not analyzing it. We're kind of allowing it to be however it is. And that's such a relief, actually, because sometimes we notice, that things aren't as we would expect them to be. Sometimes we tune into our bodies and we think, oh, I can't even feel my toes or something. And we can actually just accept that, oh, there's an absence of feeling there. And I know, obviously, when we're talking about brain injuries, and I know you've been talking today about things like loss of smell, sometimes if you're listening to guidance and it's saying, well, what can you smell? And there's an absence, you can kind of get lost in that distraction of thinking about that and churning that over. And actually, we can just label that absence. We don't need to get caught up in the whole thought around that. Or we might even say neutral. What am I feeling just now? Oh, I might not be feeling really anything. We could say neutral. Or if one of the senses is blocked, if you're not able to smell something, again, that kind of sense of neutrality, I think, can be really helpful. So we're going to go into a short practice where we are going to touch into the senses. And I'm just going to invite you to bring this attitude of curiosity with you. So see if it's possible to not make assumptions about what might be present or what might not be present, and to not get too caught up in the storyline as well. So in a moment, I'm going to sound a bell, and the invitation is to maybe sit with your eyes closed if that's comfy, or just to lower your gaze. And we'll touch into each of the senses and just be open to whatever's there. Be open to whatever you find. So take a moment to settle, kind of think about a nice comfortable seat. You might want your feet flat on the floor. You might want your back kind of straight but not rigid. Close your eyes if that feels okay, or gently lower the gaze. And in a moment you'll hear the bell, and there'll be 3 bells at the end of the practice. And we'll be sitting together for about 7 minutes just now. So it can be nice to start with a few deep breaths and just seeing if that feels supportive for you right now. These deeper breaths can really help us to settle, and the body can maybe settle into stillness. Sometimes the mind will soften as well at this point. Whenever you're ready, you can allow the breath to take a more natural rhythm. There's no need to breathe anyway in particular. You can kind of let go of the breath, let it really do its own thing. And for a moment, I'm going to ask you to tune into whatever you can hear. Almost having a sense of resting with the ears open, just being receptive to sound. And this sense of welcoming any noises in, whatever sounds you notice, accepting them, allowing them to be there. Or if there's a quietness, if there's an absence of sound, accepting that too. Anytime the mind wanders, just gently guiding it back to that sensation of sound. And maybe we notice that the soundscape is forever changing. Sounds come and they go. Much like our internal experience, our emotions and our thoughts are always changing. So resting with sound just for a moment more. And then coming to the sensation of sight. If the eyes are shut, you might notice the quality of light. You might notice shapes and patterns. And if the eyes are open, you might notice whatever's in the peripheral vision. Or again, there might be an absence of sight. So really being curious, what do I notice when I focus on that sensation of sight? You might even be curious and scrunch your eyes up a little bit and then loosen them again. How does that change what you can see? Just bringing in a playfulness here. And then coming to the sensation of smell. Maybe noticing just initially if you can smell anything just as you rest here. And you might take a couple of deeper breaths in, quivering the nostrils maybe. And again, this attitude of curiosity, not making assumptions, not getting caught up in analysing. And again, those words absence or neutral, if they feel helpful. Coming to the sensation of taste. Maybe swallowing a couple of times, running the tongue around the inside of the mouth. We can have quite strong emotions attached to taste. So you might be curious about emotions. How do I feel when I do this? And then the sensation of touch. What do you notice in those places where your body makes contact with the chair that you're resting on, with the floor beneath your feet? Anything that the receptors of your skin are picking up. Maybe your clothing, maybe the air. You might even choose to put your hand onto different surfaces just to feel different textures. And again, you can kind of be curious here. What does that feel like? What do I notice? Kind of moving around, if that feels okay. And then just for a moment, resting with whichever sense you would choose to rest with. Keeping your focus on that sense and exploring it a little bit more. What do you notice? How do you respond? How does it feel to have your focus there? And bringing the focus back any time that it wanders with gentleness, with kindness. And perhaps coming back together with a few deeper breaths as we listen for the 3 sounds of the bell. Okay, so although that was a short practice, you might still feel that you want to have a little stretch afterwards. If you don't have glasses on, you might even want to rub your hands and kind of put them over your eyes, get a little bit of warmth going through. So feel free to move in whatever way you would like to move as we come back together. And hopefully during that practice, you were able to kind of keep your focus on the different senses that we were kind of focusing on. But what I'm sure you will have noticed, and what we often notice when we practice mindfulness, is that the mind will very naturally wander. And quite often people feel that they're having a bad mindfulness practice if that's what's happening. But I just want to say that that is, it's completely normal. And actually, the act of mindfulness is noticing that the mind has wandered and bringing it back to whatever we're focusing on. So if you notice, oh, I'm thinking about what I'm going to have for lunch, or I'm thinking about the next speaker, or I'm remembering what happened this morning, wherever the mind goes, and it goes in all sorts of places, if we've noticed that, that's an act of mindfulness. And we can simply catch the attention and bring it back to whatever our anchor is. And we can do that as many times as we like. And we always remember that attitude of non-judgmental. We're doing that with kindness. We're doing that with acceptance. We know that the mind will wander. That's just what minds do. And as many times as we need to catch it and bring it back, then we can do that. So I love mindfulness because we're really encouraged to be kind to ourselves and give ourselves a break. And it can really help us just to come away from that inner critic that can sometimes be so harsh. So when you think about it, we can really be mindful of anything. So we did a practice there where we really focus on the different senses, but we can bring mindfulness into our daily lives in lots of different ways. So one of the things that I really love doing is mindful walking. And when we walk mindfully, we might slow down the pace of our walking. And it's not so much about the destination, as it often is when we're walking just generally in life, but it's more about that whole process of walking. There's a Vietnamese monk who's written a lot on mindfulness, who I love, who's called Thich Nhat Hanh. Some of you might have heard of him. And he talks about us walking as if our feet are kissing the earth. I really love that idea. It's that kind of soft kind of gentleness as one foot goes down, touches the earth. We really allow that foot to go down before we pick it up and we walk again. So there's a lovely kind of softness to mindfulness, and we can focus on the feet on the ground. We can kind of kiss the earth in this way, and then we can start to focus on the environment that's around us. So this is kind of maybe where the senses come in. We might feel the air against the skin. We might hear the trees rustling. Depending on where we're walking, we might have the sight of traffic kind of going, past us. And we can really kind of bring our whole attention into just the fact that we're walking. There's a lot written about mindful running, not something I do myself, but lots of people swear by it. And again, it's that thing of kind of bringing your full attention in. If you think about it, there's a lot that's been written recently about flow. And it's this idea of kind of getting into a flow with something. And if we're doing that, again, we're really being mindful. All of our focus is in something, and we're just in that moment. We're just enjoying it, and things are kind of coming together, and we're going in the way that we want to. Or we can bring mindfulness into our daily tasks. Things like brushing our teeth. We just brush our teeth so automatically without even thinking about it, and that whole experience is kind of gone. But we've got that whole sensation of the toothbrush, on all around the mouth. We've got the scent of the toothpaste, maybe. We've got the taste of the toothpaste, maybe. We've got all of these different things that we can really tune into. One of my teachers once said to me, and this is years ago, but it stuck with me. And I probably say it every time I teach a new session on mindfulness, because it really strikes me that he said to me, "How many people do you shower with?" Now, he didn't mean literally. So if your mind has gone there, but the other day, that's not what I'm talking about. That's a different thing entirely. But a lot of us shower first thing in the morning. And what happens is that when we're showering, our minds are already racing ahead to whatever it is that we're doing that day. You know, our minds are already racing ahead to the meetings that we might have, the people we might see, the places we might go. And before we know it, we've invited all of these people into our shower space with us. And so the invitation is to see, can you shower mindfully? Can you look at the water as it comes down? Can you feel the sensation of the water on your skin? The scent of whatever it is that you're using to wash with, the feel of it, you know, the real sensation of the soap. You know, we can have a really different experience to showering if we bring our mindful attention to it. So I always think that's a lovely one to kind of to give to people. How many people do you shower with? You can always sort of, you know, the cogs are turning. Oh my goodness, all of these people that I'm bringing into to something that I really don't want to bring into. So yeah, I'll definitely leave that one with you. And then this idea of bringing your full attention to something, to anything. We're just going to pick this up and play with this just now, because I really want to demonstrate to you that mindfulness isn't all about this kind of lotus position, which none of us can do, with our hands in funny positions and sitting there for hours and hours, which, you know, we really don't have time to do. We can really be mindful just in the moment. So I'm going to ask you to pick up an object, anything that's kind of near you just now. I've got a pen. I mean, that's, yeah, a fairly standard object, but something that you can actually pick up and hold in your hands. You can hold it in one hand or both hands. And I'd invite you not to pick up your phone, because that can be just majorly distracting for you. So leave your phone where it is, but pick up something else. And then I'm just going to ask you to start bringing your full attention to whatever it is that you picked up. So really take a moment to tune into this with your eyes. Kind of hold it, examine it, look at it from all angles. See all of the different textures of the thing that you've picked up. Notice what's on the surface. You might be able to see within the object as well, depending on what it is that you have. The different colours. Notice if there's parts of it that you're drawn to. You know, maybe you even want to touch that part, and if you know, go ahead. Do feel free. Maybe there's parts that you want to smell, depending on what you've picked up. My pen certainly doesn't have much of a scent. Maybe you react to different parts in different ways. So just really tuning into this object, really noticing it, as if you're seeing it for the first time. We've been talking mindfulness about approaching things with a beginner's mind, this kind of idea of not knowing. And what is this that I've picked up? And then just for a moment, you can explore it with your eyes closed. Does that change your response to it at all? Do you want to touch it differently? Do you want to move it differently? How does it feel when you hold it in one hand, maybe your more dominant hand? And how does it feel when you hold it in the other hand, your less dominant hand? So really being playful here. And then see, depending on what you've got, can you balance it on one hand? You feel the weight of it or the lightness? What does the texture feel like when you just allow it to sit there? I'm being curious here. And then holding it again in both hands, maybe with your hands out, allowing it to balance. So we're really bringing in this idea of playfulness and curiosity. And then opening your eyes again, just choosing to see it, maybe from lots of different angles. And then in your own time, you can place that down. And maybe just take a moment to notice, how do you respond to that object now? Does that feel any differently? It's probably something that's quite familiar to you. You know, I'm guessing most people are in their own houses. with things around them that they're pretty familiar with. So how did that feel, to bring your mindful attention onto something that you're really familiar with? And it's that attitude of curiosity that we can bring into anything. And that's really what mindfulness is. So we're going to end with a very short practice where we're going to focus on the breath. And we'll often find in mindfulness practices that the breath is often used. But I always want to come back to this idea of choice. So do remember, when you're listening to guidance, if whatever's being guided around isn't comfortable for you, then you can always choose to place your attention somewhere else. And so if my guidance, if that is bringing up kind of some difficulty, whatever that difficulty is, you might choose to come away and maybe go to one of your senses, or you might choose to pick up your object again. So let's just settle. Let's hear the bell, and we'll just be sitting for about 3 minutes, and this will be fully guided. So taking a few deeper breaths, seeing if you can allow the deep breath to travel all the way down to your belly before you slowly release it again. And then whenever you're ready, allowing the breath to settle. Allowing the breath to take whatever rhythm, whatever pattern it chooses. And seeing if you can be curious about the breath. How long is the breath in this moment? And then you might notice how deep the breath is, or how shallow. Whether the breath is smooth, or maybe has a stop-start or fluttery quality. There's no need to change the breath at all. We're just being curious. How is the breath in this moment? And if the mind is getting really involved and analysing and labelling, just see if you can come away from that and simply be with the breath, however the breath is. There's this idea of following the in-breath and then following the out-breath. You know that the body knows how to breathe. We can kind of let go of any need to control the breath and just be with the breath. The warmth of the air as it leaves the body. The coolness of the air as it enters the body. Can you feel that and notice the breath journey? Or maybe you feel the body responding to the breath, the belly rising and falling in the chest. Perhaps the shoulders are moving, the back. Just being with the body as it breathes. And knowing that at any point during a busy day, you can always take just a moment to pause wherever you are and focus on the breath. The breath can really help to ground us and soothe us. This idea of pausing and breathing. And we'll hear one mindfulness bell that will bring us back together. So thank you so much for being here and for giving up some of your lunch break. It's been a joy to be with you. I'm just going to put some contact details into the chat box if anyone would like to get hold of me. But also, you can always contact Anne Marie. I'm more than happy to answer any questions about mindfulness, or to talk to you about maybe coming and offering some sessions, or you might even like to join our online community. So thank you so much, and thank you, Anne Marie, for the invite for this lunchtime. It's been a
Oh
pleasure.
no, thank you so much, Susie. It was lovely. I don't know if I want to go to work this afternoon or not.